the situation in Iran has gotten much, much worse for the protesters, as death toll in Iran may already be in the thousands. This is tragic for the protesters, and it's probably not going to help the regime at all, as protests have not had a history of being put down by violence. You've seen this particularly in the Russian Revolution, where you had a group of protesters go to a palace that the Tsar was supposed to be in. The royal guard ended up shooting on them, and it just resulted in larger protests and more pressure against the Tsar at the time. That's what's most likely going to happen here. But it's a horrible loss of life. But actually, the people of Iran continue to be brave, as even amid violent crackdowns, Iran protests continue. Go Iran. We support Iran. And they are incredibly brave for doing this. Marco Rubio even had a tweet, "We stand with the brave people of Iran." They deserve, after going through all the strife, it's been 49 years. It's been a long time since the people of Iran have been free, and free from the oppression of the Islamic regime in Iran. And they deserve to be freed. They have fought for it. They fought for many years. There was protests in 2022. There's been protests previously. And now, this protest is close to the tipping point. It's gotten it's across the entire nation. It's incredibly strong. It's put the entire Iranian regime under threat. And Trump's even supporting it. And now, a couple triggering conditions have happened for the U.S. Trump made this tweet, this truth, a while back. It said, "If Iran shoots and violently kills peaceful protesters, which is their custom, the United States of America will come to their rescue, and we are locked and loaded, ready to go. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump." He made this on January 2, on the 2nd of January, right at the beginning of the year when the protests just started. And now, violently and killing peaceful protesters, Iran has now done it, and thus the triggering conditions. So what's Trump's response? Economic sanctions. Trump announces final 25% tariff on countries doing businesses with Iranian regime. I do not like this move, for a couple reasons. The main one is that this is not going to help the Iranian people at all, because one of their major things in relation for this protest, what triggered it was the economic conditions and the devaluation of the Iranian rial versus the United States dollar. It's now, I believe, a million to one. And that's what triggered it. So putting economic sanctions on them isn't really going to help them. In fact, it might make it so they're more anti-U.S. And feels like they're more likely to be abandoned because, again, this triggering point of this protest was the economic conditions. So this might put a little damper on the fire and make it so they're less likely to support them. Now, I see some of Trump's reasoning here. If they put economic sanctions on countries that take Iranian oil and then just export it through their own countries, that will harm the Iranian regime. And I see that reasoning there. In fact, it might work, might not. But overall, it's whenever there's a tariff and you put pressure like sanctions on countries, it's not really the country leadership that takes the hit. It's more of the actual people within the state, within the country itself. And again, this protest was over economic issues. So it's not like this is going to help them. Now, I also see where this could also be a distraction to Iran, because Trump has used distraction tactics previously. Whenever he was mentioning, whenever he did any military action, really, he used distracting tactics, and that's actually a good reason. He's trying to fight over Greenland right now, and I think that's part of a distraction tactic. But I don't see this as an effective distraction, as it's not really doing anything. And again, it's more likely to make the people that are actually in the country feel like they've been abandoned. And one of the things that was helping support the protest was the threat that the U.S. would come in and end up destroying Iran after they did something like this. It allowed a lot of people to have confidence in the protest because the U.S. and Donald Trump would do something to the Ayatollah and Khamenei when they ended up cracking down. So they thought they might not crack down. But now that Trump's done this, it probably feels like to a decent amount of the Iranian people that Trump has backed down and has betrayed them in a way. In fact, I would argue that this headline makes it a lot worse. Trump says he wants to negotiate. Trump says Iran wants to negotiate, weighs strong options to respond to deadly protest crackdown. So the fact that Trump says Iran's negotiating and he might actually be engaging with negotiations. Again, it might also be a distraction. You never know. In fact, I think that's a decently viable option. But it also signals to the protesters in Iran that Trump's not willing to do what's necessary to end up taking down the Iranian regime. And I do not like this move from those perspectives at all, simply because, again, this was an economic protest start, and this is signaling U.S. weakness. Additionally, with that U.S. weakness, if the U.S. can't do anything militarily to Iran, it also signals weakness to our other enemies like Russia, like China. And it signals that we don't have enough military assets spread throughout the world to actually stop possible military advancements from either Russia or China. And that's not good for U.S. long-term interest across the world. It makes China more likely to be aggressive in Taiwan, makes Russia more likely to advance on NATO allies in Europe, and maybe even Georgia or Kazakhstan or other nations near Russia. So this is, in my opinion, not a really good move, unless it is truly a distraction tactic and U.S. sends out B-2 bombers. I actually saw a video. I probably should have saved this. I just remembered it now. But I actually saw a video recently of a B-2 bomber actually flying off in Florida. So there might be some action there. So that's a little bit of hope on that in terms of military actually using the military to strike. Honestly, I think we could do it. B-2 bombers incredibly stealthy. A lot of the Iranian missile defense was taken out under the 12 days war against Israel. So I think honestly, just a couple B-2s would do it and destroy a lot of the Iranian defenses and most likely take out the leadership. So that's a little hope there, but it's not the best. But overall, if this is a distraction move by Donald Trump, great, love it. But right now, I'm just taking it at face value. I do not like this move by Trump. At least putting some pressure, even though I don't think it's going to be good pressure in terms of supporting the protesters. At least it's some pressure. And it's a lot better than what the left is doing on the protest right now. In fact, a lot of the left ignored it for a long, long time. And this actually led to a protest at the BBC in Britain. This is protesting right outside the BBC as they did not cover anything. A lot of the US, British, and a lot of Western media did not cover the Iranian protests at all. And that's why a lot of people are protesting here. So let's watch it. This actually led to eventually pretty much all the media actually having to respond and actually start covering the Iranian protest. This is quite obvious. A lot of the left and Western media has been captured by the Islamist ideology. You see that simply from the fact that BBC did not cover anything, and the reason they're captured It's because they do not want to anger the people that they have on their side. You saw this with also a lot of U.S. lawmakers actually starting to condemn Hamas, and guess what? They got tons of backlash. And now a lot of the people that are in charge of a lot of these states, and particularly the media, they don't want to have that backlash. They don't want to lose voters. So they have that results in them not covering this simply because it's more anti-Islam, and it's actually an extremely anti-Islam protest. As if you see right here, Iran mosques are a symbol of oppression and death. That is exactly why 25 plus have been torched along with the Qurans. And oh my gosh, it's glorious to behold. Soon the IRGC will be running so far away. So this actual mosques. So that's why the left doesn't want to cover this. It's clearly an anti-Iran, anti-Islam protest for the most case, and a lot of the countries in the U.S., Europe, and throughout the West have been captured by Islamist ideology. You see it in Britain, and how you get arrested for the fact that you say Islamic immigrants should be removed. You get arrested in Germany, Britain, throughout Europe for speaking online about being anti-immigration. In fact, there was I thought this was pretty funny that Iran that Britain ended up making a game that was basically trying to re-educate gamers and people online to support Islamist views. And it's kind of obvious here that's a lot of the Western countries are captured by this ideology. You also see it in Minnesota and the protests there. They're actually defending Somali immigrants and immigrants that are actively defrauding their own people. You see it in New York City, and how they're now Mondani was blasting Quran music there. You saw it in Dearborn, Michigan. You see it in even Texas, where now a bunch of Muslims ended up trying to create a Muslim-only community down there. A city that was only for Muslims, and non-Muslims would have to pay extra taxes. Of course, Texas, being the based state that they are, ended up disallowing that and doing as much to remove that as possible. So a lot of these places are captured by the ideology, and it's quite obvious here that they don't want to cover a protest over this. And it's kind of obvious that the left is just completely disregarding this. So that's the worst response possible to this situation, is just disregarding it, not paying any attention to it, as then the protesters get no help. There's no reaction, there's nothing for support of the Iranian people. But that is much, much worse than Trump's move in terms of doing the tariffs and actually advocating for support of Iran. The Iranian people and overall the people of Iran that are fighting against the Islamist regime. Now, I don't think, again, I mentioned that was not the best support. I will actually now go over the policies of what I think that should actually go to help the Iranian people. So first of all, Musk had just opened Starlink for free in Iran, giving protesters a lifeline amid internet blackout, and vows to keep the network up running and block any attempts by the regime to shut it down. Freedom signals in the digital age. I actually think Starlink and the fact that they can't really cut that off very easily is the most important move to make in this fight for the protesters in Iran. Because if the internet's cut out, the protesters can't organize, they can't mark buildings of Iranian government supporters. They can't do anything to coordinate and fight against the regime. So having that communication is incredibly critical. And I'm very glad that Elon Musk is actually now giving it out for free in Iran, because it is definitely in the U.S. interest to fight against a dictatorship that has oppressed its people for a long time, and is supported by China, Russia, and our enemies across the world. So I think this is a great move. Now, the only issue with Starlink is that it's restricted by one major issue, is that they have to have terminals. They have to have satellite dishes and terminals made by Starlink that can successfully connect to the satellites. And that's a major problem if they do not have that. So what I think they should do in this situation is mainly to find a way to, first of all, get rid of this blockage and get rid of any attempts on the Iranian regime to end up actually stopping this. In fact, it's been quite successful so far. In fact, and in a lot of places, the Starlink is up and running again. This is an example where they're right next to a Starlink satellite dish, and now they're actually able to get service, and they're able to actually communicate now. But again, I kept mentioning that that the major restriction right now is the satellite dish. There's not a lot in Iran. I believe there's only like 50,000. That's not enough to give it to every single person, and it's still severely restricts communication. So what they should do, in my opinion, find a way to secretly smuggle in the terminals and the satellite dishes into Iran. There's a lot of cities, particularly on the western border with Syria, that have been captured by the Iranian protesters that aren't in the control of the IRGC, that aren't in control of by the Islamic regime within Iran. So that might be an easy way to smuggle them in. Go through Syria, which now has a leader that's more pro-U.S., that is more anti-terrorism, and go through Syria, ask the leader there, and find a way to sneakily smuggle them into those areas that are controlled by the protesters completely, and then give those protesters the terminals, and those terminals can go to people in Tehran and other cities that are being actively oppressed by the Iranian regime and by the Islamic regime that's in Iran. That would, one, boost the amount of communications protesters have in order to organize and actually fight back against the military of Iran. Now, the second move, a decapitation strike. I mentioned this earlier, and how the B-2 bombers can easily get through a lot of Iranian radar. Iranian radar is destroyed. Their missile systems are destroyed by the 12 Days War. They have to rebuild that. A lot of it's not rebuilt yet. So go in there with a lot of these B-2 bombers and just take out, again and again and again, all the military leadership and the leadership of the regime. Now, that might leave a power vacuum, but it's better than the regime just going in there and it's better than the regime just going in there and mowing down protesters. In fact, it might actually result in a good power vacuum for the Shah to come in. Shah to come in. And he's actually been pretty vocal about wanting to go in and help the Iranian people and help them rule their country as a transitionary leader so they can go back to a secular democracy. Go to a secular democracy that would actually benefit the people within the region. And benefit the people in the region and the Iranian people. So honestly, I think that would be the best move, because taking out the leadership leads to a power vacuum, and already there's massive support for the Shah. There's massive support for him to go in there and actually take out go into power as the new leader of Iran. There's plenty of support by the people on the ground. There's been actually a decent amount of military defections too. So there's some level of military support for him. And also another thing, I mentioned the idea of smuggling Starlink terminals into Iran. You can also smuggle certain weapons, particularly assault weapons, into the protesters' hands, and see if there's a militant part of it that would actually end up fighting against the military. as if they actually have weapons, they actually have a chance to fight back against the military and the oppression that's going on there. So that's another thing. Smuggling in those military-grade weapons to fight the actual regime. So those are some major plant. Those two major things: smuggling in Starlink and weapons, and doing a decapitation strike so the SAW will be able to come in and fill that power vacuum. Because honestly, I think it would work. Now the question is military assets in the area. The U.S. has been strongly focused on Venezuela for a while now. Took out Maduro and everything, but still, I think the U.S. military is big enough. We spend almost $1 trillion on it a year. The B-2 bombers are incredibly stealthy, and they can fly across the entire world without being detected. They did that in the original strike on the Iranian nuclear facilities. They flew from all the way from the Pacific to Iran and back without being hit at all or even being targeted. We didn't even know about this until they were way out of Iran already. So, the B-2 bombers do have the capability of just going in there without a lot of military support. But also we have other military assets in the region, and we can always ask Israel to bomb the heck out of them. Because Israel obviously is anti-Iran. They've been anti-Hamas. They've been anti-anything to do with Iran because they continue to support terrorists that have been actively engaging in violence against Israel. You saw it with October 7th. You see it with Hezbollah sending missiles, Hamas sending in missiles. Even with the Houthis, you see them attacking Israeli ships. So, and the U.S. has already been... We have a strong relationship with Israel. So we can ask them to end up doing additional attacks and missile strikes within Iran. You've seen how effective they were with taking out a lot of the leadership, the pager bombers, the taking out a lot of the missile defenses of Iran, doing coordinated strikes, military strikes into Iran, taking out a lot of oil depots, military assets, and military leadership. So we can always ask Israel to help us, as they have a clear, strong interest in getting the Iranian regime out of Iran. So, and the Islamist regime out of Iran. So, if that comes to it and that works, then great. That would absolutely work. I think at this point, a military option is necessary because the protesters have been cracked down on. They've been now massacred in the streets. And honestly, I think a lot of the protesters in Iran have called for the U.S. to actually take military action. You've seen this a lot on X. You see it a lot in a lot of other places. That they've been calling for Trump to actually do something now that thousands of people are dead. So I think this will work if the U.S. goes in there and takes action. In fact, I think a lot of the people in Iran won't see it as the U.S. supporting the U.S. now controlling the Iranian people. A lot of people within Iran itself would be very, very grateful towards the U.S., similar to how a lot of people in Venezuela are very, very grateful for the U.S. taking out Maduro and forcing a sort of a coup on the Maduro regime. So you saw the protests and support, more like celebrations, not really protests, but the celebrations in support of the Maduro of the U.S. and the taking out and the practically kidnapping of Maduro from his own country. So I think that will be a similar situation here, where a lot of people from Iran would absolutely celebrate U.S. action here. So I think that's a way better response than either that Trump's offered up or the left has done from simply ignoring it. So what do you got, all of you guys thinks in terms of response? I think that's probably the best, doing smuggling in weapons to support the protesters and decapitating the military. But what does everyone think? Do you have any other creative ideas in order to help topple the Iranian regime? Or do you have any criticisms of my analysis? Just tell me down in the comments. I probably will respond to you. And I thank everyone for watching. And remember to like and subscribe and show someone you know. I'll see you guys next time.